Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for the review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I recently wrapped it up. The entire walkthrough of FS7 Rebirth is up on the channel, so you can check out all of my gameplay throughout the 40 videos that I made for this, which I'm pretty sure the only one that comes close to being that long is probably Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I also have up on the channel. I haven't did any reviews of that game after I finished it, but this video is going to be pretty long. I'm just going to cover a little tidbit of what happened in Remake, get into what we know now on Rebirth. And I'm going to have to go through, I've never done this in any other review with other video games before, but this is so massive. Out of each little thing I have to cover, not just with the characters, but with the plot, certain areas, music, things like that. So don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think of Rebirth, Remake, and what you expect in the third installment, which a lot of people suspect that, just like with like Spider-Man Homecoming, with the home being like a little theme of it, of the titles, the last one should be like Return, maybe, Final Fantasy VII Return or Reborn, something like that. Anyway, so just to dovetail what happened in Remake, at first it was like a cookie cutter thing, because when I first start playing Remake, because I avoided all kinds of spoilers involving, because I want to come in fresh, because I'm a fan of Final Fantasy as a franchise, but I've only played at least the first time I was even familiar with Final Fantasy in general, because when I was a little kid, my uncle had Final Fantasy VII, and that was the first time I actually knew what like RPGs were, and I was a little curious because it looked pretty decent. And of course, it's the first time I was like, well, that was the first time I was privy to about like saving and of games and stuff like that, but I didn't realize the importance of like crucial save points and files and not disrupting progress of a game like that. My uncle was adamant, like, you can play start fresh, you can play from the beginning on like a different file, but do not save at all. So I was like, okay, just don't save, just keep on playing until like eventually get tired and leave it alone. And as a kid, I wasn't privy to like the mechanics of a Final Fantasy game. I didn't understand the purpose of like ethers. I didn't really respect ethers like that, like I do in my older years, and how like leveling up and how to address materials to fit, I mean, you can apply materials to all kinds of people, but certain people can do certain things, or even certain equipment can apply to only a certain people, things of that nature, just to make sure like your characters are as powerful as can be. So it wasn't until when like I got older, my first Final Fantasy game had been Final Fantasy X. So I played a little bit of the original of FF7. I played FF10, couldn't really figure out like the sphere grid all that well for some reason. I tried to do another walkthrough of Final Fantasy X for the channel. I got up to the point of that big whale creature coming at your ship when it's getting close to the very end before like the final boss fight. I had to just give up because even on easy mode, I couldn't get past that sucker for some odd reason. So I guess, I kind of just rage quit out of frustration. I couldn't complete the entire thing, but it didn't negate the fact that I still had an enjoyment out of it and still couldn't figure out the blitzball situation. That even to this day, it was super complicated than it needed to be. But I played Final Fantasy 13. I liked the character of Lightning, but everything else kind of sucked. I played, 13 Part 2, still sucked. Probably even worse than the 13 Part 1. But then I didn't play any other Final Fantasy game until FF7 15 came out. That I completed to its fruition. Completed all the way through, did all the side quests and stuff like that, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. Then of course I played 16, which I also did a walkthrough on the channel. You can hear my thoughts about that, because I think I actually did I started doing video game reviews after I completed the game, so I can give you guys my thoughts about that. But it's just to touch on it, I think the developers behind it spend too much time making like a Final Fantasy type mixed with Game of Thrones, and we got the bulk of the game being cinematic stuff, and like the gameplay was fine. The only problem was, like, unlike most other Final Fantasy games, you don't work with other characters, like swapping out, like here with Red 13 and Kate Sith and Barrett, etc. You just solely focus on one particular character, and it kind of like lowered my enjoyment of the game, because this isn't Final Fantasy anymore, and it felt more like Devil May Cry, which I like Devil May Cry very much, one of my favorite franchises ever, and Dante being my all-time favorite video game character next to Lara Croft. But that's not Final Fantasy. That's two different franchises altogether. But of course, people who worked on Devil May Cry, some of them worked on Final Fantasy 7-16, so that's why there's some parallels to it. So and of course I play Remake and now Rebirth. Now in terms of my favorite, of course, FF7, 10, 15, and the Remake and Rebirth being my, honestly, the best Final Fantasy games I ever played. And they really did a good job when I first started playing Remake. They did a great job. Like I said, I try to avoid spoilers. That, being a remake, you're just like the same game but with updated graphics. But that's when we started to see, like, because that's why I did like a video about the difference between a remake and a remaster, and I was bringing up about the situation with like certain movies like Disney remakes and stuff like that. And it's like, as I made that video, which you can check out my thoughts on there on the channel, in terms of like a video game, to use video game terms, a remaster is what these Disney movies should be called at this point. Is like you're doing the exact same thing but with updated graphics. A remake is what Final Fantasy VII and a couple of Resident Evil games that they've been doing recently as well have been doing, using the term properly. Because a remake, meaning, like, yeah, you're doing some of the same, you're in the same vein as the original FF7 game, but with a few twists and turns that kind of, that kind of throw you off, where it's like, kind of like when I play, like, when people start playing like the RE4 remake, the developers were smart by doing something different, like using the knife a little bit more intricately and blocking, or certain things pop up that wasn't there before. You're doing certain turns into areas that wasn't there before, or something happens cinematically that wasn't there before. That will be like more of like a true remake, where it's like you can't guess at what's gonna come. It's like you watching that Lion King remake, like you know what's going to happen. It's nothing surprising you if you ever watched the original Lion King at all. Here in remake, Sephiroth is back, and some of like the plot is done with like, you know, some weird things with time, where you get these whisper creatures, these ghostly apparitions that is manipulating fate in certain ways, or putting it either manipulating things that should happen, that you expect to happen, but knocking it off course. So now there's a, if you ever watched the Loki TV shows, kind of like going off on a it's like a variant type of timeline. Now certain people survive that shouldn't have survived, or they die later than they needed to be, or something akin to that. And of course, Sephiroth being the major big bad, but at least at that time, I was thinking, okay, is this like a Sephiroth that somehow survived, or some echo of him that is trying to change things, that he knows how it's supposed to end badly for him, and he's changing things in certain ways that would, shape out to be beneficial to him in the long run. He's manipulating time in certain kind of way. That's how I viewed it. And he's messing with Cloud's mind, and somehow Cloud is probably remembering fragments of what happened in the main timeline. Something is like going off course. That's how I viewed it, and it leads into like a very interesting, like, oh my god, somehow Sephiroth is like, manipulating time in some way to like, steer things in his direction. This is kind of interesting. So that way, it works well in the narrative. It isn't just a remake just for the sake of a remake. There's a narrative to it. There's like a narrative reason for all this stuff. It isn't like RE4 remake where it's like, oh, you turn into this particular corridor that wasn't there before. Why? No particular reason, just because now there's an extra space for you to do whatever, or you can deal with a particular boss fight because of whatever, to gain some extra experience, or an extra jewel or something you can sell. Here it's just like, no, things turn out differently because a time is being manipulated. So now, of course, the plate over Sector 7 fell, causes massive destruction, and now Cloud and the gang are leaving Midgard to find Sephiroth and end his reign of terror before he, because ultimately, if you ever know anything about the original story, he wants to use the black materia to, because Final Fantasy VII is pretty much about like environmentalism and stuff like that. That's what, because Barrett and the team of Avalanche are eco-terrorists essentially, and Sephiroth's trying to use the black materia to just conquer the world essentially, because he is a test tube baby for this alien creature that Shinra found and manipulated, or did experiments on it. And Sephiroth is like one of the successful test tube babies that came out that isn't all weird looking or anything like that. He's like a powerful child of Genova, and they manipulated him to be like a soldier of Sinra, being one of the best, and like the hero of the people essentially, until he figures out his origin story, lost his freaking mind, and so he feels like, oh, like I will do this for my mother. I will, seek revenge on Sinra, take control over, because the world is crying for help, and I'm the only one that can save it, because he got these like material things in his mind into these little spheres, and it's pretty much coming from the planet, and you mine so much, like I said, it's kind of like oil in real life. And so it's like or just any type of resource in real life where you mine so much of it where it's become scarce and it's become detrimental to the planet in the long run. It's kind of something like that. So now we're in the open world, trying to find Sephiroth and put a stop to his machinations. At the same time, you're also dealing with the opposing force with Shinra, with now, since Sephiroth killed the boss, Shinra, his son took it over, and this dude is cool, but he's like a pain in the ass to fight with. He's got a little pet alien dog thing, and this crazy shotgun that he has. Dope, but annoying as hell to fight. And of course, Midgard looks incredible above and below it. Developers behind this took their time, because you would rather them taking their extra time to make this game as good as it possibly can, rather than like in most cases with games in the past handful of years where they seem like they kind of cut corners here and there, or they kind of half-assed certain graphics or game mechanics or narrative stuff here and there just to put out the product quickly. Which now I'm thinking about it, Remake came out at a time when like the height of PS4. Then by the time Rebirth came out, that's when like the PS5 came out. So I'm pretty sure by the time we get the final installment, the PS6 will probably be rolling out, or already rolled out by the time the final installment of FF7 is complete. Now, just like back in the 90s, there was 3 discs, because the game was so massive. Even back then, it took 3 discs to complete the entire story, because there was so much jam packed in these discs, and that blew my mind. That was like practically unheard of, to have a game so massive. It takes 3 discs in order to complete it all. And now here you got a game so massive, even adding on top of what we already got, it takes 3 entire games in order to complete it all. So anyway, so now we're into Rebirth, and so now we're in the open world, and the world is almost as equally, probably even more so, even more massive than we're just within a particular city. Now we're in like a wider scope of at least half of the world. I'm pretty sure by the time we get into the final installment, because we're supposed to be going up north, I imagine it's going to be a whole wider array of areas, probably covering the rest of the the planet now, which is really dope. So now we're gonna get through like the particular plot here now. So Cloud's been, his mind's being manipulated, it's getting like more deteriorating a little bit, thanks to the manipulation of Sephiroth. Somehow, like, Sephiroth's getting in his head, and you had this like kind of like fits of like kind of repressing, certain things people are saying. Like, he meets up with some people who is the parents of Zack Fair, who turns out to have survived when he's supposed to had died in the original timeline, but now he survived and he's in Midgard. Now I was a little confused, like, okay, that was the biggest deal, like at the end of the remake. How did Zack Fair survive when he's supposed to, his death and Era's death are probably like the biggest death in video game history that meant so much to a lot of people. But now he survived carrying, Cloud's body to Midgard. And I'll get to Zack eventually, but Cloud eventually meets up with, turns out to be his parents, and they ask like, oh, you're a soldier too, do you know? And then they cut out the volume and he's kind of like blanking out the words. He clear mouth, the mom clearly mouthing out the words Zack Fair, and he's like, oh no, sorry, I haven't heard of him, might not have worked with him before, kind of thing. And because like in the original story, Clouds always have this little bouts of memory loss, because in the original timeline he's remembering stuff that only Zack had experienced, but he had this kind of like mental trauma essentially, or false memories. And it turns out he wasn't the one that lived out that stuff. He was remembering all this stuff that Zack is supposed to have experienced, because they was essentially partners. So they're in the city of Calm, where they're taking a rest stop and experiencing like the city, and they're making their way, because Cloud is kind of suffering from Mako degradation. Because Mako, if you mine it, it's kind of like, getting black lung. If you work in the mines, mining for like coal or something like that, you're getting black lung. If people work in those mines like a long time ago, and that became like hazardous to a lot of people's health, but that's part of their livelihood type of thing to feed their families. Mako is essentially that. If people mining Mako, they essentially getting essentially like the game's version of black lung. And even like somebody with soldiers, like Cloud, because his eyes, you can tell like he's been around like Mako a lot of times, so it's it gives him like kind of like a I want to say give him like a boost of power or something like that, kind of like make him a little bit of like a Captain America type, minor boost in strength and speed than the average person. But becomes like a derogation, because you see these black robe figures, these people who's kind of like walking I won't say soulless, but just like mindless fools that succumb to their Mako poisoning, and they're wearing these kind of black robes and they're just shuffling along aimlessly all over the place. And there's quite a few people who also had gained Mako poison that end up turning into those things. So now Cloud's worried about turning into that. Anyway, Sinra is still hunting them down, because they're being Avalanche is being blamed for the destruction of Sector 7, because they was already getting blamed for, like in the first mission in Remake, when blowing up that reactor, but thanks to the head of Shinra, not the son Rufus, but his father, who set off other stuff that caused like a chain reaction that caused like a bigger explosion than it was supposed to, which caused like a partial devastation to parts of the city, which Avalanche got blamed for. But then after the whole situation while fighting Sephiroth in Midgard, causing this massive tornado, once again they getting blamed for that, which doesn't make any sense, because they may be eco-terrorists, but they have no control over the freaking weather. But people just roll with it. And of course, the Shinra is good at, you know, spinning the news outlets and spreading propaganda. So so they out in the world, and they're, you know, trying to escape from Shinra because now they're on the hunt for Avalanche. So we got, you know, Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Rare 13, Barrett, and they all trying to, like, you know, make their way out into the grasslands, meet up with various people, trying to escape from Shinra. And then they following the Black Robes because they're, you know, tied with Sephiroth. And little by little, Cloud keeps, you know, every time he sees these like Black Robe figures, he has kind of like flashes, and he sees Sephiroth in these guys sometimes, and he just prone to just attack, and people have to hold him back because, like, no, that's not Sephiroth. What are you thinking? And that's, I'm gonna cover what I can, like certain major issues I have with this game. This being one of them, where it's like, okay, you guys, little by little, you should tell that you know, Cloud's kind of losing it a little bit, saying things that aren't there, and you don't raise the issue at no point or question it. I mean, it took like a long while before, like, you know, people like really. There's a moment when Cloud kind of loses himself, and he starts attacking Tifa, causing her to get a wound in her abdomen, same way as Sephiroth caused her to get like a wound in the abdomen back in Nibelheim long time ago. And after all that, nobody stops to talk about, like, okay, Cloud, what is going on with you? Why did you trip out like that? Nobody has that kind of sit down. They kind of push forward, and that's what kind of nobody realistically. I mean, even back then, I was about to say, like, maybe they can get away with it back then, but no, even from back then, at no point, any time in history, and realistically, anybody would have somebody, you know, loses themselves and talking really weird, and all of a sudden goes into lethally hurt somebody close to them, and after they come to, nobody starts to question, like, why did you do this? Because that'd be the first question you would be asked after things cool down, like, why would you do this? So Cloud could just hash out, you know, because they said, like, okay, we're not moving any forward until we address what just happened, kind of thing. That is a major problem, because that, you know, you don't want to be in a group with a person that freaks out like that and put the other team members in danger. That is weird, and nobody, you know, about to address that or have a sit down about that's like overlooked. Anyway, so they make their way through the grasslands, through the swampy area. Now I want to address here now, because well, I was about to address, like, you know, the certain chests, because there's purple chests where you find, you know, new weapons. Now I thought that was cool, but in remake you can easily find new weapons if you come across new stores in a certain section. There's like a new blade you can buy, or sometimes you even find, like, you know, certain blades that doesn't show up in a store in these, you know, certain chests, and that was pretty cool. You have that kind of variety there. But here, the only time you get like new gear is from purple chests or sometimes yellow chests, and on certain occasions the new gear, like I come across a new tool for Yuffie, only has like one material slot, and it's like that's kind of lame. It's like, okay, why would you apply that? Who's going to use a new weapon that only has one material slot to use, that seriously backpedals any kind of advancement in your skills with a particular character? No one wants to utilize that for any particular reason unless you're starting way earlier into the game. But even then, the earliest tools you have at least 2 materia slots, like with the Buster Sword. But this is only 1 sometimes, and it's like that is a complete waste of a new weapon. Like I participated into this kind of like mini game that helps me win a new weapon for Tifa, a new pair of gloves for Tifa. They only have 1 materia slot, and it's like, that is lame. Why would you waste that? Cool looking, but utter waste and backpedaling the skills that I've accumulated up to that point. Anyway, so Cloud makes it, they getting past like caves, battling all these other creatures, meeting up with a lot of the Turks along the way. Rude, who straight up looks like Common, the musical artist Common, and it's like, if this was like a live action movie, Common is the only person that can actually play this particular character, because they just made Common. But like we get to see Sang in action now, because for the longest time we only saw in remake Rude and Reno, who are dope characters in themselves. But now we get to see more Turks, and we get to see more military personnel, like this military woman, during the whole color guard type of parade thing going on in Junon that you hop into. And she's just like, I just call her military mommy. I even titled one of my videos that was like just military mommy, because she just got that sexy authority. But even she is like, because I like that part, because I mentioned it there, or at least in a different video, where it's like even some Shinra members, it shows like there's more layers and more nuance into Shinra than the corporate people at the tippy top with Rufus, where it's like there's more nuance to them. There's actually good people here that wants to do good things in a legit way, but the more ruthless ones are at the tippy top, except for Revis, who I only just recently realized he was controlling, because Kate Sith, I thought he was just like a creature, but no, he's like a robot type of drone deal. And is Revis, who is actually a good person, but he's trying to like fix things on the inside type of deal, but he's not being heard because he's surrounded by assholes. But he's manipulating Kate Sith to help out with Team Avalanche in order to put us out with Sephiroth, and hopefully deal with the problem within Shinra. I'm glad we got a little bit more with him, but they never made it clear that, oh, Revis is the one manipulating Kate Sith, and he didn't bother to say like, hey, I'm one of the board members of Shinra, like, I know what you think, or at least come clean, so that way they can establish some kind of trust and everything like that, because you can let them know what's going on to fill them in. But never done that. It seems like a smart thing to do if you put in so much trust in these guys. We'll start with Sephiroth and everything like that, knowing how good they actually are. And so this where they we really get into with like Yuffie, who tried to assassinate Rufus after they had this kind of like 1v1 between, you know, Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith. Like, you know, with him, he's trying to like offer a deal about like, hey, I will easily drop the charges. You can go on your merry little ways, but only, you know, thing I want from you guys is to stop Sephiroth. But then, you know, thanks to Yuffie kind of mucking things up and trying to assassinate him, he thinks like, oh, they're trying to oh, they, you know, they're not to be trusted, blah blah blah. But then they end up going on this little cruise ship trying to escape, even though, you know, they just put out an announcement that, hey, you know, there's you know, members of Avalanche disguising themselves as like a Shinra soldier. You know, nobody's, you know, allowed to leave off this platform until we search everybody, blah blah blah. But of course, you know, they managed to get off and leave on a boat, you know, destined to Costa del Sol, which is pretty much like a tropical Hawaii type of resort, which is probably like one of my favorite areas out of the entire game. I really like the look of Costa del Sol. It's very fun. It just, you know, makes you feel like I want to go to Hawaii so bad now, or Jamaica, something like that. But you know, in terms of the favorite locations, is Costa del Sol and Calm, and of course I like Midgar too. But those are probably like my 3 favorite places out of the entire game. They meet up with Johnny, who we turns out, you know, find a girl who's into him, and we finally get those two to actually, at least her, to, you know, go talk with Johnny, express how you feel about him, because like Johnny's kind of infatuated with Tifa, even though she doesn't feel the same way. She's only seen him as a friend, and you know, it's like finally we kind of squashed that kind of situation. But knowing the developers, I'm pretty sure a lot of people like Johnny and would want him to come back for the final installment, because you probably gotta at this point. But if you do, you see them as a couple now, like, you know, this other girl who's kind of like bitter and jealous of Tifa for stealing her Johnny away, kind of thing. But now they run a hotel together in Costa del Sol. That kind of thing is really dope, because I kind of warmed up to Johnny. He was kind of annoying in Remake, but here it's like there's a bit of growth. But they stop Hojo, who I completely forgot in the original FF7, went to Costa del Sol, and, you know, getting, you know, treated well by these local girls and stuff like that. Very creepy kind of vibes. And start this machine that's trying to kidnap them, and also the rogue figures. But you know, that's where Yuffie helped out, and then we eventually get her on the team. While I did not even know this, I didn't really remember, but in the original FF7, Yuffie was an option to get her on your team, which why wouldn't you want practically Naruto on your team? But that was an option. You could have completely skipped, you know, entire thing with Yuffie and not bring her on board and move forward. But why would you? But here, you know, you answer her questions, and then she just comes up on board because she's super horny for materia, which you could have played up to it, where the fact that she's super excited against some fancy smancy materia, you could have just, you know, have her try to steal material left and right from certain places, or try to kind of like Rocket Raccoon trying to get at Winter Soldier's arm, because he wants that arm. You can get her looking like try to snatch her party members material off from their weapons. Like, no, back off, leave that stuff alone, kind of deal. I don't know, you could have played up to that, but she's kind of like a petulant teen. But they eventually make their way, you know, from Costa del Sol over to the core region, where we see Barrett's kind of like where he grew up, because he wasn't like a Midgardian originally. He moved there after a certain period, and it turns out Barrett is the town fool, essentially. He's getting berated and essentially abused and mocked by the local residents, at least for the most of them, aside from a couple of people. And of course, the party members looking at it like, dude, what the hell? Like, why would you let them like pour liquor on you? Like, no, I deserve this. And you figure out about, you know, Barrett's past here, which I'll cover, you know, as I get through all the characters and you know, and what like I got from them. But then after they meet up with the doctor who treated Tifa after the situation in Nibelheim, and which is kind of weird. Nibelheim is in a whole different kind of continent, essentially, and she was being treated for like a wound, and I guess maybe because the city was pretty much being burnt down, so where's a doctor where you need them? Clearly there were survivors. Unlike in the original game, it seemed like there was no survivors. Here there were some survivors, and not one of them was a doctor. Or if they were seeking, you know, needed medical attention, was Coral really that? I imagine they would have been like the closest area to find like some medical assistance, but you know, I imagine they probably patched her up as best as they could until they get her to a doctor to properly treat her. But even then, that's kind of like that's a little finicky in terms of logic, trying to get her so far out to find like a local doctor. But that's what happened. That's where you learn a little bit more, because these thanks to this doctor filling us in about at least a little bit about these rogue figures, that the derogation from the Mako poisoning is affecting them, and it looks like, you know, Cloud, you know, it's a little bit affecting him, and he's like, oh, let me take a blood sample so I can like check up on you, see how you're doing. And Cloud refuses, which is kind of like the other party members should be kind of like, no, you probably should get, you know, treated, because you're kind of wigging out, and if you're getting, you know, potential Mako poisoning and you might end up like these guys, you could easily be treated and find some kind of cure, possibly. You don't know, but of course they left that there. Kind of stupid. Then they move on, and then we end up in like the Golden Saucer, which is pretty much like a Disneyland amusement park kind of deal. Here you know, that's where I figure out about the whole date situation, which I did not realize beforehand. You heard me bitch about it halfway through my walkthrough, because I was realizing about the meter. I just thought like, oh, this is just getting like you know, interacting with your teammates, and it's kind of boost morale and unity and synergy and stuff like that, which I'll get to the gameplay in a different in a separate thing. But then I realized, oh, there's a actual point to this where you know, the higher the meter, the more you the higher the meter with a particular character, that's the one you'll end up on a date with at the Golden Saucer. And that's what I know. I was like, oh my god, you know, they're all really high, really kind of high, except for Yuffie, because he only been recently added to the team. But I'm thinking like, oh my god, Red 13 is the highest. Why do you have him as like a freaking, you know, one as a potential date match? Now again, it's probably those furries out there who probably like the idea, and I can't really fault Bear being one of them, because there's probably people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community who probably have a thing for Barrett and want to ship him and Cloud together. Like, I can't fault them for that. For me personally, I was like, oh god, I wanted Tifa, because you know, that's the one thing where you actually get the kiss. At least I know for certain you get a kiss with Tifa. But I'm gonna say right here, like, I got Aerith, so kind of like glad about that, because I would, if I couldn't get Tifa, at least give me Aerith. I don't care, because it just seems like weird because I do not want to have like a date with a. They call him a dog, but he looks like a saber-tooth tiger, which is kind of like a cat-like figure. It looks more like a cat figure than a dog. I'm sorry, it just is to me. And nobody's freaking out by the fact that this creature is talking. And the same thing with Kate Sith, but of course nobody knows Kate Sith is a freaking robot. Anyway, but you get this nice little date with Era, which I only just recently figured out that in the proper, you know, original timeline, that would have been the canon date anyway. So it's like, oh well, that's kind of good anyway, because all the other dates are just non-canon kind of dates. But the Air thing was supposed to be the canon date anyway, so I was like, all right, it's fine, well, whatever. I got the canon date, turns out, so cool. Would prefer Tifa, but you know, because Tifa is like the most iconic female waifus in pop culture history. Honestly, who doesn't like Tifa? There's Tifa, Aerith, Bayonetta, you know, Trish from Devil May Cry, Samus Aran, Lara Croft. You know, it's like high on the, you know, tier list of, or at least, Chun-Li, you know, a lot of Mortal Kombat characters, Chun-Li, Yuri, you know, Laurel from Street Fighter 5, well, a lot of Street Fighter female characters. A lot of them are pretty much, you know, big waifu types. Lady Dimitrescu, you know, at least quite a few Resident Evil female characters. So yeah, it's but in terms of like the biggest iconic one, you know, I think one can argue Tifa is probably like the highest of them all. Anyway, so that's where we meet. You know, we had like a situation with Barrett's past again with one of his friends from the coral region, who also lost an arm and turned into a gun arm like his, but on a different arm. And we learned that because obvious Marlene isn't Barrett's kid because doesn't nothing look like him, but it's pretty much like his adopted daughter. And it turns out this guy was Marlene's dad, who he thought died, but it turns out was alive after he got captured by some local thugs underneath Golden Saucer. And Barry is blamed for his murders at the Golden Saucer by Dio, this muscle-bound, you know, fool. And instead of running a proper investigation, he sends Cloud to go prove his innocence, which logically that wouldn't be the case. But they get jumped by these local gang members underneath the Golden Saucer, thinking they captured Bear for somehow. They decide like, okay, we'll run this chocobo race, win, and I'll get to the mini games like a chocobo races soon. But once they win, they'll show where you know, their friend is. They go there, they come across Barrett. It turns out that's, you know, the person they captured was Barrett's friend, and that's where Barrett has this, you know, confrontation with an old friend of his who he kind of lost his mind after, you know, he was probably like the only one that didn't agree with Barrett, who, because we meet up with that Shinra lady, Scarlet, who convinces many cities to allow Shinra to come in to mine their local mounds that have, like, you know, Mako nearby and stuff like that, and you know, help with renovations and build up their town and things like that. But it caused a catastrophe, even though, you know, his friend Dine didn't agree with it, but because Barrett was so convincing, that's why the town of the core region was mad at him, because they convinced him. I mean, he was convincing, And so they all agree that this will probably be beneficial to the town and make them prosper. But it caused there's an accident. Shinra tried to cover it up, and through the means of trying to keep dying from falling into the cliffs below, Bear's trying to pull him up. Scarlet takes a gun and fires at them and causes them ruin. The bullets riddle, both their arms, which causes them to it's supposed to get prosthetics, but they, I guess, chose gun arms. That would explain it. But now everybody blames Bear for him convincing them to go with them. That's why he turns into like an eco terrorist, because Shinra pretty much lied to them about their motivations and caused the utter destruction of his hometown. And now they're kind of like in a Dust Bowl, Old West style type of landscape across the cliffscape. So now that Dine in the original game, he felt bad about all the terrible things he's done since that ordeal, and he thought he lost his wife and daughter. But Bear tells him like, hey, like Marley survived, I'm taking care of her, she's fine. But in the original game, he felt so bad about the atrocities he's done, and doesn't want to go home to his daughter with blood on his hands. In the original game, he offed himself by jumping off a cliff. But here, given the fact that we don't want to depict something like that, this day and age, because how people are very sensitive to that type of thing, people offing themselves in that way. Now he's kind of died by cop kind of situation where he fights off Shinra members and he takes a lot of them down, but he's brittled in bullets himself and he dies there. And Dio offers to give him a proper burial, even though he's responsible for killing a lot of your security in the Golden Saucer. Why would you feel the need to give him that courtesy? But then he gives the team one of his trucks, so they go off. They head out to eventually Gongaga, see this former Turk member, Sissy or Cece or something like that, who is running the town where Zach Fair grew up. And that's where they find this old factory where part of the team dealing with Scarlet. And this where the rest of the team show up. Cloud starts hallucinating, attacks Tifa. She ends up into this river where this Mako whale creature is, who has a giant Mako sphere on his belly. Gobbles her up. She sees the past with back in Nibelheim and everything like that, which there's a reason for that, I guess, but it's never really fully explained. How's it service her? How can she use this? It's just reason to show her how Cloud was back then, how very reserved and introverted he was back then. Then the whale coughed her back up and they eventually move forward, with no explanation from Cloud of why he attacked her. But trying to establish a wound now, because in the original timeline, Sephiroth left a wound, but she tried to show him her wound back at Calm, but we never see that because he tried to blank that out. So we never see that she had a wound that healed up, or it wasn't there at all until now. Cloud left that wound now, try to recreate that moment where Sephiroth, left a cut. But it just shows that how infectious, Sephiroth is being towards Cloud's mind, or something to do with the whispers, or at least how fate and disjointed the timeline is. It might be in a combination of all that stuff. So what next? Then a ride from Sid, who eventually becomes a part of the team. They get a ride, back to Nibelheim, where they get a they eventually bump into Sid, but they get a ride not to Nibelheim. Yeah, they go to another region. I forgot what's that other region? Cosmo Canyon, where we see a little bit more of the history with Red 13 and this old man who knew his parents, is supposed to be like the guardians of the region. And here it's very confusing here, because Red 13 has been put on this kind of front with his voice, making it seem like an old wise man type of voice, but then he uses his real voice and it sounds like more like a 13, not 13, it's like a like a 14 or 15-year-old type of voice, which is kind of shocking to everybody. But then he goes back and forth after this moment with his voice. I don't know why he needs to put on a front like that, because it really makes no sense. But we eventually learn about these Gi characters. It's kind of like these shadowy specters who was responsible for creating the black materia, because since they didn't come from the earth like most other people, and once they die they go to they return to essentially the soil and become part of the life stream. Since they can't go to the live stream, they become like wandering specters, and they create this black materia in hopes to, somebody to wield it to destroy the planet. So that way, since there's no planet, there's no reason for them to wander, because they just want to die. Eventually, they end up getting like a ride from Sid to Nibelheim on the next thing, where you get a little bit more history with Cloud and Tifa. And these black robe figures, they just go all over the place, and sometimes there's no reason. They shouldn't even gone past the grasslands, let alone going all the way to these other continents like Nibelheim or Gongaga. This makes no sense how they even feasibly be able to do that. And in fact, they're just wandering, shuffling along with just aimlessly, with no particular way to get cab fare or something. So they just kind of like makes zero sense. They're just there. They even show up in Costa del Sol, and people's partying and having vacation time, and these little, hula girl type girls trying to they kind of killing the vibe here. And it's like nobody's reading the room. It's kind of odd. No security is like pulling them off the streets, because it's kind of like weird. It only seems to be Nibelheim that doing anything with these people. It's like, okay, let's give them some medical treatment, some day-to-day care, aside from that one doctor in the Coral region at Barrett's hometown. But there's still a fair amount of the black robe people even still in certain regions, even by the end of the game. But the vast majority of them seems to be like wandering towards a particular destination. That's where the team is following. And more like Sephiroth's having more influence on Cloud, because he's very gung-ho about getting that black materia and following these rogue figures. That's where they eventually meet up with Vincent, and his fight turning this vampire demon creature is like a pain in the ass. Was a pain in the ass to fight. but he eventually comes on the team. Now, mind you, it was the same, not too dissimilar to Red 13 in remake, but there's certain sections where even he offers some assistance where you can point him to like unlock a certain area because he can climb and scurry along the walls, so that way you can unhook a hatch or something. You don't do nothing like that with Vincent. At least Sid, he offers air travel, um, so you can get to a certain destination. But you know, Vincent just there. He helps out in a couple of areas, but you don't like, you know, point him to certain areas so you can see him utilize one of his guns or vampire abilities to do something. You know, it's kind of sucked. You kind of want him to see him do something. That kind of like tease us what we can expect when we have him playable in the final installment. Same thing with Sid, because I think in the original game, Sid just probably uses grenades. At least I vaguely remember that. I can't remember how, you know, their playstyle was back in the day. Um. Uh. Eventually, uh, we make our way back to the Costa del Sol, so we can get like a ride with Sid to the uh labyrinth area where the black materia is being housed. Kind of reminds me of like in the Mummy 2, where like this giant pyramid type of, well, it's not a pyramid, but this giant structure in the middle of a forest where you go inside and there's black materia, and the clouds pretty much lost it and being controlled and manipulated by Sephiroth. Aerith tries to take it away, uh, but she fails thanks to his whispers that's always being manipulated by Sephiroth. Once Cloud comes to, he tries to save Aerith. Uh, uh, Sephiroth, you know, cuts down this little tree branch thing that they're on. They fall, and somehow they, you know, end up in back at outside the outskirts of Midgard, where turns out Zack found them. Because there's another issue with this uh game where it's never clear with how this timeline thing work, because they're utilizing obviously time, but it isn't, you know, coherent, very disjointed. I guess that's a purpose, but we should be able to still understand it to a degree. Where in the beginning of the game, they kind of hinted at, oh, our team members somehow died and they're being caught off on gurneys on helicopters by Shinra, but Red 13 wakes up. They cause like a uh, uh, plane crash near Midgard. So that's where Zack comes in. He doesn't recognize anybody else but Tifa and Aerith and Cloud. So he gets them back to Midgard, where under the sector where Aerith is supposed to be, where Aerith was raised, and he bumps into one of those like extra supporting characters. Crap. What's her name? Uh, Crap. Kyrie, I think. Sorry. Uh, yeah, Kyrie, Kanan. She come because she pops up every once in a while. Uh, up until Costa del Sol, where she's related to that old woman that's you know in Midgard that we help out in air sector. Uh, uh, Morel, her grandmother Morel. Yeah. Um, and that's where he bumps into uh Aerith's mom, helps and because he's still looking after Marlene, and he bumps into uh uh Biggs. Yeah, it was Biggs. I keep confusing Biggs and Wedge with their names because Biggs is the skinny one, Wedge is the fat one. um so um sorry, got a little distracted here. So um is Biggs, who's well, he sees like a wanted poster of all his dead comrades, but he's assumed like they're all dead. But in the original timeline, he would have been dead. But thanks to the whispers, he managed to survive. So he's trying to continue on, with the mission. And he's like, meets up with Zach in order to like deal with all that stuff. And of course, this whole entire time, Cloud and Aerith seems to be completely unconscious until they eventually wake up and they see like a tear in the sky and they're confused about that. But it turns out they're in some kind of alternate timeline, which is very unclear. I had to figure this out just yesterday as I'm trying to piece together what's going on. Like, cause I was very confused. I think a lot of people are very confused on how the narrative structure at this point in time is, okay, it's not an issue with, utilizing the timeline and it's being manipulated somehow by Sephiroth, but you got to, because like something like Back to the Future, you understood how the mechanics of time works in that movie. Even with something like Avengers Endgame, then their use of time makes some bit of sense where you can, where it's very one-to-one, where you can at least follow it a bit. You can't follow it here. At least the general audience is very kind of, okay, how does this make sense in that kind of way? Because it's very confusing. It's like the opposite of Memento. If you've ever seen that old Christopher Nolan movie. Because telling time out of sorts, but even with Nolan movies, when he does things like that, you can at least somehow follow by the end of the movie how it all connects. You can't do it here, and that's the problem. That's one of the problems in terms of the narrative structure. It's like you can do it, but you gotta make it make sense so the general audience can like better understand it, so they can get on board with it. Because that's where Kyle eventually wakes up, because he's in a different timeline where everything goes wrong. Aerith pushes him through like a time portal thing in the old church where they first met, where just as Sephiroth was entering the church room, and he wakes up because that's part of like a different era from a different timeline when things went wrong. So she hands him like the materia of faith, hope, something like that, materia of light, something like that. To utilize to help stop Sephiroth of his time, where he can see where they failed. So he wakes up as like Baird is carrying him, and they follow to the area where they find Aerith praying, trying to put a stop to beseeching to like the world to stop, because he's like essentially part of Genova, which essentially makes Aerith Sephiroth's mom, or at least part of her, part of his mom. Because you can see like some similarities between her appearance. You get to see a bit of Aerith's mom as well, because the human mom, I guess they both kind of part of Genova, because the hair and facial structures are very one-to-one to Genova. Not the mom who was raising her, the actual mom, where you see her die in Sector 7, well, in a flashback where Aerith was still very young, and that's where she come across her adoptive mom taking care of her. So that's where this is another confusing part, because you expect, because in the first game you expect Aerith to die there, but that got circumvented. I was like, oh, so Aerith now, instead of dying when she was supposed to die in Remake, she survived. So there's like a branch in a timeline, essentially. But here, this is another confusing part, because Cloud stops Sephiroth from killing Aerith like he's supposed to in the original timeline. But now it's kind of like a Schrodinger's cat kind of situation, because now she still died, but she survived too. It's very back and forth. So now it's confusing whether, because it kind of feels like developers trying to have that cake and eat it too, so that way they can have some room to do whatever they want in the final installment with Aerith, instead of just like committing to one or the other. So now it's only, while everybody else in the party thinking like Aerith is dead, Cloud is the only one that seems to be able to see her. So it makes little sense as to why he's the only one that could see her. Maybe because he was the closest one to her to experience this stuff, while the others weren't. But even still, it just like it makes no sense, and it wasn't clear on that. And it's okay to leave it open-ended in certain narratives if you're playing like a 3 installment type of story. But look at the original Star Wars trilogy. Any one of them could be their own story in its own right, and it could have ended there, and it was still narratively kind of satisfying in a way. Or even like the Nolan Batman trilogy, any one of them can be like a complete movie on its own without the need for another movie, because there's satisfyingly ending of a story for this particular film. Here you can have like a 3-part trilogy, but you gotta have some level of finality and some area openness, like Han Solo and Carbonite kind of situation, where it's like, okay, that is a open thing where you can take it to the next film. The Joker playing card at the end of Batman Begins, that's where you can leave it open for another film, and where it's going to take it there. Here it's kind of like that, but not, where it's like, okay, what is Aerith at this point? You can have killed her like you did in the original timeline, but just in a different part of the narrative than it it happened later than earlier this time around, and you could have left it at that. And now there's like a different way to take these characters, or leave her to survive this time around. Even though Aerith's death is the most impactful death in video game history, and you can still give us that again, but in a different point in the story than it happened initially, and you still probably service the same, give us the same kind of feeling, or subvert our expectations and just still keep her alive even after this, the past 2 games. You still keep her alive, and people are expecting her to maybe die in the 3rd and final installment or something. Like, now you're just doing this, and it's kind of like very confusing. Like I said, very Schrodinger's cat with Aerith. So it's like, is she alive? Is she not? That's confusing to the audience, especially the general audience, because who never played the original Final Fantasy VII game back in the 90s, because they didn't exist yet. So it's like, okay, what is this? Even to those diehard fans of Final Fantasy VII would say like, okay, what is this? Not saying it's necessarily bad, but it's confusing. Anyway, so now Cloud still has the black materia. He puts it in his sword for some odd reason, not telling his friends that he has it, and they go off up north to deal with Sephiroth, because he kind of bitched out after this awesome fight between, because now, like, with the messing with like alternate timelines, eventually Cloud teams up with Zack to help fight off this Sephiroth Genova creature thing. And because it's like a merging of different time spaces, where Zack and Cloud deal with this creature in one section. It falls and it lands into a different platform with Baird, Yuffie, and Tifa is dealing with another one. Then Red and Kate Sith is dealing with this. Then it comes back around with Aerith, Zack, or at least maybe like an Aerith from a different timeline. I'm not sure. Once again, very confusing. Teaming up to defeat Sephiroth. All very awesome. Don't get me wrong. Very good. Very, very good. But then Sephiroth, pushed out like a bitch, left, realizing like, I'm not yet ready kind of situation. So now they travel up north to, on a different set of adventures, probably another part of the world to deal with Sephiroth. So now that we covered like the major plot here and all my issues with that, let's get through like particular characters here. So there's a lot of characters here, so I'm gonna try to like get them as much as I can here, because this is gonna be a very long video. Cloud Strife. Now Cloud still top notch, because a lot of these characters are very top notch. There's no weak link in none of these characters. Everybody's playing to their strengths. I cannot say any fault with how the characters are portrayed here. The only thing is this confusing way of telling their narrative into the next game, like the whole is Tifa alive, is Aerith alive or is she not kind of thing, aside from something like that. But Cloud, until you get to the part where how to explain his memory thing, the memory issues, and his behavioral partway through into the 3rd act, nobody sat down to talk about that kind of stuff. They just continue on like it's something that you can hand wave away. That part I find kind of like narratively an issue with that. Or at least could have been handled a little bit better than they have been. But Cloud has been handling great. The voice actor, at least all the voice actors are great. I can't say anything wrong about any of them. But his gameplay mechanics is a lot better. The dodge mechanics have just been a separate thing rather than it's its own thing rather than a materia or something, or something you can upgrade to allow. But yeah, we get a little bit more with Cloud's history with Nibelheim, even though he's remembering stuff that's probably happened to Zack more so than him. I'm pretty sure by the third installment we get a little bit more clear picture with Cloud, and I'll probably address that there, and maybe it'll make sense then. But as of right now, it's very confusing in terms of, you know, his memory about his mom and his memory about his life in Nibelheim as a kid and his memory about his time as a soldier. All that stuff needs to be like concrete clear. Barrett, we get a little bit more about his, you know, life in his old stomping grounds and his situation with, you know, Scarlet and her manipulation of a lot of people like, you know, Barrett's old town and exploiting the people there for their resources. And he at the time was gullible, thinking like, oh, Shinra, you know, because before he realized how scummy Shinra is, and so he was all for improving his town. He was doing everything for his town, but because he, you know, put all his eggs in one basket and didn't probably do his proper research about these people, or even if he did, they kind of spun it in a way to make themselves look good. He just, you know, believes all their lies and convinces everybody in that town to follow suit. So they did, and they, you know, their town paid the price for it. A lot of people lost their lives, including Barrett's wife. And so now they looked at him as a pariah, and he feels like they're justified in feeling that way because he didn't he didn't I mean, he utilized the information that he knew at that time and he acted on it. He had no clue about, you know, how despicable Shinra was as of yet. It's all about, you know, life and learning from it. But then again, you know, they're not, you know, the town, most of them are not going to see it that way because they lost people and a lot of their resources. They live in kind of like squabbles all because of him. But it's very cool narratively in terms of we got a little bit more backstory with Barrett and his bittersweet friendship with Dine, and how why he's so invested as a father with Marlene, because he's trying to play two parents essentially because she lost both her parents, and he just pretty much like, you know, trying to service both of the parental role for Marlene, being a doting dad and everything like that, because it's something that he feels like his friends would have expected him from him. And even on dying words is making sure like you live for Marlene, and like you're gonna pay us back by looking after Marlene. You get Tifa. Tifa, always a star. Only regret is never getting that date with her. Like I said, it should have been, like, you know, I'll get to the whole mini games and other stuff in a little bit, but it should have been a little bit more clear on what to expect in terms of like the dating mechanics. But I guess they want to leave it as a surprise so that way not everybody and their mama will just go towards Tifa automatically, because where's the fun in that kind of thing where everybody was just automatically going to go to Tifa instead of just figuring it out along the way. But how many people really want to like going on a date with Red? Why? Except for those few minute group of people who are furries. It isn't the general populace. But Tifa is amazing. Her gameplay mechanics, it's cool, but I feel it could have done better because I had to utilize a lot, because her reach is very short range because she's like a fighter, but you got to utilize a lot of her abilities in order to uh, make it from close range to mid range type of attacks. Other than that, her only long range is utilizing spells or grenades or something. But her look is phenomenal. Oh, and of course, like, Cloud's gameplay is, and Bear's gameplay is very cool too. I utilize the Punisher mode a lot more. The whole counter stuff built me out a lot in here. Then I utilized it in Remake, but not at first because I was a little bit confused on how it all works. I've never been much of a counter type of guy, but I think the counter mechanic is probably the best in Remake and Rebirth than it is in most other games that I can remember, because I don't utilize counter attacks all that well. Because I just want to like get in close and really like mix it up a bit, kind of like Devil May Cry, because I don't use counters like that. And Barrett's like, utilizing his kind of like a tanky type of physique in order to keep myself, soaking up attacks while I'm utilizing my gun arm to like, take down a lot of forces, especially if they're too far away. It bails me out a lot, in my opinion. Aerith is kind of like the white mage, obviously. I mean, there's certain occasions where it's like, man, it wasn't until like halfway through the game I kind of utilized her blocking mechanics. I don't block all that much in this game, honestly, except for maybe like a few occasions with, or at least mostly with Cloud, if I'm not utilizing the counter stuff. But even then is when dealing with certain characters where I just cannot just straight up counter like that, and I'm just utilizing like the block materials to build up my meter. But Aerith, halfway through, I started utilizing her defense when trying to get away or at least soak up some damage to build up my meter, so I can utilize her, the chrono sphere grid on the ground to, especially people who move around fast or they dodging so much of my stuff, I can freeze them long enough so I can get some hits on them. So she's been beneficial. A lot of them have aided me in one shape or another in order to deal with certain things. It wasn't until like partway through the third act where I actually started having to switch over to easy mode to get past certain things, like these gate demons, where it's like, okay, this is kind of stupid now, because the developers make certain creatures needlessly complicated, and you solve in certain puzzles that's needlessly complicated. That kind of takes you out of the game. I've seen a lot of complaints with many of commenters mentioning about certain mini games that's like takes you out because of the complexity of it all, where you got to look it up and how to figure out how to get past certain things, because it's like fighting Rufus in the Golden Saucer was super complicated, and because he counters you so expertly, where it's like, okay, I need to get past this because it's getting kind of stupid at a certain point, because I felt like darn near 5 times before I just like, okay, I gotta look up how to get past this guy because it's kind of stupid at this point. There's a knock I had against that. But of course, like, Aerith and her relationship with Cloud and the others, because she has this like impressive speech at the end where it's like very Captain America level of like a speech where you're just sucked in to how it's like, like the perfect eulogy I ever heard in my life or something. You're sucked into what she's talking about, and the actors did an impressive job in conveying this speech where you're just very involved in what she's saying and how you're just uh soaking it all in. It's done very well. But is important in my opinion because Aerith is such an amazing character in video game history that you cannot screw this up. They want to make sure that each character, especially Aerith, is done as well as it was in the original game, and you could not mess up in any kind of way with this character. At least maybe not in terms of gameplay wise, but in terms of the narrative structure, you could not screw this up because a lot of people will cry foul on that one. But they done it exceptionally well with this character. Up until the point with the whole is she or is she not dead kind of thing. That part is very, very confusing. All right, Red 13, you get a little bit of his backstory and how he got caught by Hojo's crew and then get branded Red 13. It's very kind of horrific, and it makes you feel for him, and his distrust of humans and how he had to warm up to the party members. But he's been a very effective teammate, very fun. He got me out of a lot of gems in his own way. I mean, you got to utilize him in certain ways, like in Costa del Sol, playing in certain games, and so you can win this brand new collar for him. And it's like, oh my god, he's a whole lot of fun. Especially he's useless, when it deals with the flying type of enemies. But when you deal with ground enemies, man, he's like literally like an animal. And you take out a lot of folks, especially towards the end. I'm just like knocking folks out with his character. He's very fun. And his backstory with his father turning to stone, and he's like, he had like a bitter grudge against him. But after he learns, which is kind of stupid, because even though his elder of the region, knew his parents and the whole situation, he refused to let the kid know because of this cockamamie thing in a lot of narratives here. It's like, I didn't want to tell you because I need you to figure out on your own, because if I told you, you'd be on a revenge trip and before you was ready, blah 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 blah. So stupid. Could have, I don't want to like rewrite the story, but it's kind of cliche when you're thinking about it, where it's like you could have done something to make that work. But now it's like, oh, I thought my father was like a coward, but now I see he was the bravest of them all. So now I'm going to make him proud by stopping anybody from getting their hands on the black materia, and eventually stopping the Gi from causing destruction of the planet in order to sever their goals of, getting the death that they want. Now we get Yuffie. Now, once again, I did not play the DLC, but I have seen other people play it. I should have played the DLC so I can automatically get the Odin summon. Was it Odin? No, not Odin, but the Ramut summon. Because utilizing the electricity and stuff like that would have helped greatly, but it's fine. I probably should have, but I didn't. Like, after a certain point, I was like, I don't know. But eventually, if they come up with another DLC for Rebirth, I'm definitely gonna play it. So that way, by the next game, any DLC require any new kind of thing offered by playing whatever DLC of Rebirth, I will automatically get a certain thing that I don't have to work hard getting it. But Yuffie and her mission with Wutai in the DLC and losing her friend, thanks to, once again, Scarlet, because now, just like with Barrett, she has like a very close-knit arch enemy to deal with when it comes to Scarlet, because she was instrumental in creating this mummy type of figure enemy. Don't even know the character's name. I'm pretty sure that guy will show up again in the final installment. and that's why she ventures out to go find Tifa and the others and join that party, because she is now entangled in this whole machination with Shinra, more specifically with Scarlet and the goofy monsters that had, you know, reason to cause the death of not only her friend in the DLC, but a lot of Wutai compatriots that she knows. But she's just like a fun, very spunky, spirited character because it's got that youthful energy. And it would be so easy to make her so kind of cringy and annoying, but you know, she avoids that line where you're just enthralled with her spirit, honestly. And she plays very fun. You know, it's, you know, you throw her shuriken and you allow it to go. It's so easy because I keep slipping into a button that calls that, you know, the retrieve of the thing while I still want to keep going, and it kind of messes up my kind of combo structure that I had going on. I kind of wish it wasn't so easy to mess it up, but it is what it is. It didn't take me out of it, but it's still fun utilizing her combat skills. She like Bear is useful when in terms of long range damage dealing, but she got to use this kind of fire ninjutsu thing. I kind of wish that she has like an ice ninjutsu, lightning ninjutsu thing, instead of just a fire ninjutsu, because it would have been beneficial in terms of certain enemies that's resistant to fire. I can utilize a lightning ninjutsu, etc. So that way, you know, she can be kind of versatile. Hi Pine. What was your favorite just anime character in general, or because I'm just talking about, like, you know, my experience with FF7 Rebirth right now. If you're talking about the game, outside of Cloud, Tifa, and I really do like Yuffie. I really do like Yuffie. I didn't expect, you know, me liking Yuffie all as much as I did. And as a matter of fact, I'm not sure if it's just nostalgia, but for some reason, every time we've seen those still images of at least the old images of the FF7 characters in that painting kind of style, you know, I don't know, I really like that look. I don't know why. All manga. Oh, my favorite. Well, if you just in general, my favorite anime character, Yugi from Yu-Gi-Oh, Ash Ketchum, Naruto, Ichigo Kurosaki, Jotaro Joestar, in terms of favorite anime characters. Oh, and I do like Deku and All Might. A friend of mine tried to get me to, you know, watch some Jujutsu Kaisen. I gotta do that at some point because everybody's raving about it, and I haven't gone around to checking it out because I got other stuff to review in terms of TV shows. Because I'm getting through Food Wars right now. Because I do like Soma Yukihira. I really like that. Oh, and Natsu from Fairy Tail. I do like that character. But I'm getting through Food Wars right now because I'm reviewing each season of Food Wars. I'm binging season 4 right now. But after I'm done with Food Wars, I'm gonna go through a lot of the Batman TV shows, like the original animated series, Batman Beyond, Brave and the Bold, and The Batman. Once I get through all that, I'm gonna go back to some anime, and I might check out Jujutsu Kaisen after that. Ichigo, Goku. Oh yeah, like, I mean, I like Goku fine because, like, you know, believe it or not, like, you know, Dragon Ball Z is my top 10 animes, but he's not in my top 5 personally. I'm sorry, you're kind of confusing with the words at the end here. Sorry. Anyway, where was I? So uh after Yuffie, Kate Sith. Now Kate Sith is a fun character. I love using his dice mechanic thing because I kind of wish they'd do a little bit in a couple of areas. There's at least one role causes like a seems like a hyper beam, and I kind of expected something like Pokemon with like hyper beam, like some being that comes out of nowhere and it attacks the enemy. I kind of expected that. I don't see nothing. It's kind of like a waste of a side. Maybe I missed something, but it felt useless to me. Uh, who is the most powerful character in anime? I'm not really talking about anime right now. I'm just trying to go over the review of my experience playing FF7 Rebirth. But to answer your question, Saitama from One Punch Man, I think, is honestly up there in terms of the most powerful anime character I've seen. Anyway, but I like using the dice mechanic because I like, you know, like the randomness of it. But he's a fun character in terms of that aspect. I kind of wish they kind of utilize some luck-based type of gimmick with him, like aside from the dice, maybe a coin flip or something like that. Let's see what kind of thing you will get because it's kind of fun in that aspect. I'm glad. Speaking of which, I'm glad there's certain sections where you're only utilizing one character for a particular mission in this game at certain points. Like K Sith, you know, travels along like the air vents and stuff to get to a certain area to let other people pass through. No, I'm not, you know, berating you or anything like that. I'm just trying to make sure I don't lose track of what I'm talking about. Because I'm trying to make sure I get through. Because this game is very big. I'm trying to make sure like I'm focused. I'm from Illinois. So where was I? So yeah. I'm glad you get to utilize certain characters for certain parts of the game where you can utilize them to get through not only certain sections like Yuffie with the grappling hook and stuff like that, but because you get a little bit of that in remake with Barrett and Tifa, and I think with Aerith, but now it's kind of like spread out to now everybody in your party gets a moment to themselves, so it kind of feels like a true team. Australia, oh yeah, you know, yeah, I'm from Illinois in the U.S. You from Australia? I actually, you know what? Because other than like a viewer at one time calling, mentioning in from Paris, I think you're the other person who calling from a different place outside of the U.S. I heard about those drop bears and stuff like that. How crazy that is over there. I only recently heard that from a podcast that Australia is, you know, is riddled with those drop bear things. That's kind of freaking scary. No, I'm not married. Sorry, because that's probably like I do not want to go to Australia. If y'all got like these drop bears that come down on you to just rip you up and stuff like that, is freaking terrifying, man. Uh, uh, what else? So now we're going through like the other guest characters. Vincent, like I said, I kind of wish we get to see certain things he can do that we can, it's kind of like a tease into what we should expect from him once he becomes like a playable character in a final installment. Same thing with Sid, but at least with Sid you get to you know, utilize him to at least traverse back from continent to continent very easily. But they are still fun, cool designs. Zach Fair, I just mentioned him earlier. utilizing his game mechanic is very fun. It's kind of like a very chargy type of, instead of Punisher mode, you get this kind of charge style combat with him. Very fun. And for some reason he's using his Buster Sword, where typically something that Cloud should be, because Cloud adopted the Buster Sword from him. But he's, like I said, the timeline is confusing, but it's doing this alternate timeline situation. I kind of wish they were a little bit more clear of. But he's very fun. Sephiroth, awesome villain. No notes with him. You know, we touched on Biggs. We only get to see like a little bit of a flashback with Wedge and Jesse. And it's fun to just get those voice actors back for at least a little bit of a cameo. But not much to say about those guys. But we get a little bit more with Biggs here, which is cool. But I kind of wish we kind of let him flourish, just like see like how he's carrying on, since all he knows, he's the only survivor after the Sinra thing. So we got the executives, and you got Rufus Sinra, awesome character, you know, cool side villain, but sorry. My light is about to fall. Cool side type of villain, but it kind of seems like he's trying to do more than his father, but going in a different way, because his father literally calls like the other destruction of part of his city and blaming on like terrorists and stuff like that. But you thinking like, okay, he can do something differently, but still has like machinations of his own, but leading to like a more of a steady hand or something like that, not something as reckless and selfish as his father. But then you got Scarlet, who's like just another maniac under the guise of like just kind of go weapons. I don't know if she like what she does. Is like a weapons kind of like dealer. Like yeah, weapons development in the Shinra Electric Power Company, and she is like, you know, instrumental in, you know, getting people to like get on, other cities to get on board with supporting Shinra, so that way they can mine whatever thing they want, or at least mine for the Mako stuff, build reactors like in Nibelheim and the core region, stuff like that, so they can utilize it to, you know, run experiments and build weapons and stuff like that to make Shinra the more powerful like industrial complex possible. And she's an awesome villain, you know, in her own right. Hojo, very creepy, you know, scientists and stuff like that, you know, just like the cliche type of mad scientist type of guy who for some reason one of the field operatives, Roche, who, you know, is obsessed with fighting Cloud and utilizing that motorcycle, never fully explained as to why at one point he, you know, got Roche to sign up to get experimented on, and then eventually he turns into one of those black robe figures. That part, there's a gap missing in that as to why or how that even came about. I kind of wish they kind of filled that in. That was very confusing as to like, why is he signing up for that? You know, are we missing something? Is he getting punished or something in his contract? I'm not sure, but you know, that's what happened to Royce. And Hojo should have easily been killed right on the spot on that beach of Costa del Sol. They had the opportunity, but they just let him go. It's so stupid, honestly. Uh, Palmer is just like a wheezy little twit, and Heidegger, who is just like the military, you know, general of the place. He kind of disappears at a certain after the whole situation at Junon. We haven't seen him since, so it's kind of, you know, what happened to him. He kind of just, you know, left, you know, was never heard from again. We never seen him again. You kind of expect him to show up at the Golden Saucer along with Rufus, but we didn't see him. Reeve, I kind of wish we get to see him play a more of an active role instead of like a passive thing. But I guess he's trying to work behind the scenes, not to tip his hand. But he seems like, you know, you should have utilized, you know, Kate Sith a little bit better, so that way he can fill in the, you know, our team as to what's happened back home, so they can always be informed. I kind of wish he could do a little bit more like that. I'm just confused on certain things. Like, you know, certain things you're saying is like the words seems kind of weird. After you ask about the whole girlfriend thing, you have like Abe, Banter Key, Shikai Key. I'm not sure what that is. I'm a little confused. No, because I don't know, as I don't have to pay for all this extra stuff to get those kind of features. At some point I should do it. But I got like well, I kind of like, man, I'm a procrastinator maybe, like, but I just don't want to have to put in money and stuff that I don't have like the extra funds to do all that kind of stuff. At some point maybe I get around to do it, but not right now. But at some point I have to do it. I need to like pull that trigger eventually. But man, but everything's so doggone expensive right now, especially for some kind of Streamlabs overlays. But you're right, I probably should at some point just eventually pull that trigger and get that done. But as of right now, I'm just trying to like focus on my review, man. But thank you for joining in on me and chatting it up. Don't think I'm not, you know, grateful at all. What else? Like, oh yeah, the Turks. We don't get to see Reno until the very end, because earlier they mentioned he was on vacation and stuff like that. It's like, you guys take vacations? But Reno is still fun. Rude is still fun. Very cool, suave type of dude. Same thing with like Sang. You know, he gets stabbed by a, you know, clone apparition of Sephiroth, but it's like he walks it off. And it's like, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like Star Wars, where it's like people after Qui-Gon Jinn, people getting stabbed in the stomach, they walk it off later. And it's like, come on. But Sang is pretty dope. We finally get to see him fight and how he fights. Probably like the best out of all of them. But Elena is still fun. But as soon as they utilize their combo moves, they're just devastating, man. What else can I talk about? Well, I can just get through like the regions and how they look, because each one has their own unique thing going on in which they, the developers took their time in making each region look as prosperous and vibrant as possible. It's kind of like with Star Wars, with each planet having like their own kind of ecosystem, uh uh you Pine, you do know like some of your messages, like seem like they kind of like some make sense, and the other times when you leave in certain things, they're kind of like jumbled words that I can't really keep track of what you're saying. I don't know if you noticed that. I'm just thought I'd point that out. Um Anyway, so yeah, let's go through all the to wrap it up here, to wrap up the video. I'm gonna go through each of the regions. So yeah, each one looks as vibrant as possible in their own little kind of ecosystem. So calm, this not as big as Midgard, but it's kind of like a nice little not rustic, it's kind of like, I don't know, kind of compact. Kind of like, maybe like, I've never been, but it's, from the images I've seen and videos, it's kind of like an Italy type of landscape where it got narrow passageways or something like that. But I do like that, in that particular town, even outside of that, is kind of like a old rundown type of desert. But yeah, it's that is pretty fun. Oh, I didn't want to forget about the mini games. Let me cover the mini games before I get into the regions. The mini games is probably like my biggest fault I have of this game, and I think a lot of people will agree that sometimes they tend to take you out of it because they either complicated or they're too difficult to where you don't know what you need to do to get past that because of the particular mechanic is being utilized as kind of like, beating you constantly. Aside from maybe the Queen's Blood thing, I think the Queen's Blood is kind of like a fun, it's like out of all the mini games, the Queen's Blood is probably the best mini game, at least until you get to the actual demon creature of Queen's Blood that you have to defeat. Until you have to, because I have to do this at the tail end, where I have to look it up on what cards that I need to use in order to defeat this entity. And it's his own separate video that I had on my YouTube channel in order to show, okay, what you have to do, what cards you have to apply in order to be able to work around, what the Queen Blood does when you defeat her in a card game. But that's probably like the best minigame in general. The others are ranging from nonsensical to meh. The chocobo races is all right, not really the best part, honestly, especially when you're trying to beat everybody. In that drifting type of mechanic, and I could never figure that out until I actually was forced to figure it out in the mini game in the Golden Saucer. What else? There's some stuff in Costa del Sol that was alright. Oh, the piano mini game, that was so stupid, honestly, because it took me up until I get into Costa del Sol until I kind of dawned on me on how that mechanic worked, because I couldn't figure it out early on in the game. But even then, when I figured out, okay, what I have to do, it's so needlessly complicated where you gotta, it's like splitting your brain into doing two things at once. And maybe some people can figure it out, but me, no. By the way, Pine, thanks for the follow. Didn't even mention that. Sorry about that. But even then, you gotta use these two trigger things. Here, let me. Oh, here, got my thing right here. You gotta use these two devices here as like because you got two circle spots, and once you see one highlight towards the end of the loop, you follow it, and you see the other, you know, giant circle do another thing at a certain area of that circle, you gotta follow that. But then stuff lights up at the same time, you gotta like follow it at the same time, and you miss one, and you're trying to split your mind into two different things, and it's like, why you gotta make it like, you know, complicated like that, or at least make it easier for people to follow the meaning and to pass it? Because at best I got like maybe like a B in one instance, and that was in Costa del Sol. But even then, it's like, oh god, I do not want to deal with that. That was stupid, honestly. So the mini games, you know, by and large, I don't want to say they're garbage, but they could have been handled better, because there's been many complaints that I've seen on many videos that, yeah, this part sucks, this one takes me out of it, why is it so complicated, blah 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 blah. And I cannot disagree with them, honestly. Until you play it yourself, I gotta say, like, yeah, this is kind of, you know, dumb. So yeah, it is the biggest fault I have with this game, for keeping it from being like absolutely, like, I want to say no game is perfect, but if I give it like a rate, like a percentage wise of a quality of this game as a whole, I might give FF7 Rebirth maybe like 90%. Still really good, but certain mini games and certain puzzles, or even like fights that might, like the demon gates, for example, or the Rufus fight in at the Golden Saucer, that you have to be forced to look up how to get past that. If you have to look up how to get past a certain section, that's a knock against the game. Because if you can't figure it out on your own after 3 attempts, that is a fault of the game after a certain period, because then it's kind of too complicated. They expect you to figure out on your own. And sometimes, yeah, you can call it, you know, the maybe people in Japan are a little bit more smart than the Western people, but I'm sorry, it's not very user friendly. Anyway, now to the regions. The grasslands are just dope. Hold on a second. Because each land has their own little chocobo station, and each chocobo does their own unique thing. That part was pretty dope. But the fact that you had to track down, in order to gain access to them, you have to do a little mini game again to be able to sneak up on them, hop on their back to capture one, so you can be able to utilize a chocobo. You know, I'm glad at least they all are generally the same thing, but you gotta sometimes trick other chocobos to look in the other directions, so that way you can get past them to get to the one that you want. And I kind of wish they, well, I don't want them to like mix it up, because, well, part of me wants them to mix it up, but the other part kind of feel like, okay, at least it's the same thing, so you don't have to do something, you know, stupid in order to catch them. But at the same time, it's like, why can't you just, you know, do a particular mission, track down you know, these group of thieves, or you know, help me find my thing, just so that way I can, you know, be grateful to you, so you can utilize my chocobo station, instead of this, you know, sneaking around in the tall grass like I'm playing freaking Pokemon to find, so I can track down your missing chocobo. So I love the grass area. The fiends there is pretty dope, and a good starting area in order to learn how to utilize your game mechanics. Uh, and you meet up with like these other uh characters, like the brother and sister chocobo uh breeders, who has this bitter grudge against the guy Chocobo Sam back in Midgard, who once again doesn't want to tell anybody until they figure it out on their own so they can come clean later. So dumb. But there's a lot of cool returns of, you know, old remake characters coming back for at least a little bit so we can see them. Um it's fun to see like Nibelheim. And Nibelheim is uh you know, they built it up after, you know, places burnt down, thanks to Shinra built it up after one of their own, you know, burnt it to the freaking ground. But now it's kind of like a respite for people who need nursing assistance and stuff like that. But everybody's sitting there kind of like begrudgingly helping you because like, can you just leave, please? I don't need you to hear, kind of thing. The Ganga residents, Cisne is fun. Everybody else, it's like it can take it or leave it with them, but she is fun. Kind of wish we get to learn a little bit more with her, but maybe she'll make a return into the final installment because she's a former Turk and never fully explained as to why. But I guess that's open ended, so that can easily be brought up later. The Golden Saucer residents, but more specifically Dio, he's all right. If I could equate to any weak link, even though I don't want to qualify him as a weak link, Dio is probably there. But even then, I still don't hate him. But if I had to give any weak link of a character, he's one. Anybody that's lower than him is those group of thugs. One of them, which is voiced by Troy Baker. That's like, I don't feel the need why we have this little extra thing here because it's kind of pointless, personally. Solomon Gus, I think that's his name. Yeah. Junon. Well, below Junon is like this fishing little area, which got a cool resonance, but above where you see, like, because Junon is kind of like the hub of like the military section of Shinra, with a giant bazooka on top that hasn't been fired, but because Rufus is being manipulated by another cloak figure that actually can speak, but has been working for Sephiroth. But it wasn't until the end where, you know, Rufus finally clued in, like, you are forcing a war for the service of Sephiroth. But duh. But it's kind of cool to see him just shoot down this figure because, once again, it's like, I don't see the need for this guy. So you just see him just murk this dude right there and there. It's kind of ballsy. But you get to see like how this military organization is run, and you know, their training facilities and everything like that. But now they kind of kicked off a war, and which is going to probably be another major part or major component in the final game. What else? Cosmo Canyon, get to see a little bit. Don't get much to do there, but we get a little bit more history with Barret, which is part of the reason why I enjoy that particular region. Outside of that little roller coaster type of ride you take on as you're knocking down boxes to get to the other end, so you can get to Cosmo Canyon. I mean, get to the Golden Saucer. No, not that's not Cosmo Kane. I'm thinking that's still the core reason. But Cosmo Kane is where you another more here than I have with the previous game, and now we get like his partner. Crap. We got Charlie and what is it? His partner's name. Uh oh, Fort Condor. That's another minigame that was so stupid. Had to look up on what to do in this particular board game in order to just get to the end and win it, because it's so, I mean, it's fun to a point, because at a certain point, because you're trying to get to because you need to get these little fragments from these mini games for the world intel to fight this samurai type of figure, which I never got to do because I don't have one of the summons that you need to get in one of his world intels, unfortunately, because that summon was ridiculously hard. But you get, each region you get to a certain section to do these puzzles in order to get a lower ranking to easily defeat a summon, so you can acquire the materia from Charlie's thing, which is dope, which makes it a whole lot easier. But even then, I couldn't get that final summon from Charlie because he was crazy hard, and you got to go through this complicated thing from what I looked up in order to get him. It's like, I'm not doing all that stuff. That's way too much just to get this guy. Uh, uh, but God, what's that lady he works with? The other robot girl. Ah, crap. What's her name? Trying to figure it out. Wall Market. That was like a thing I was trying to remember, that you see those old residents of Wall Market. That was the name. God, it was bothering me. Um, crap. What is that? Uh, uh, my. She is fun. Too bad we never got to see her like physical presence, but maybe we'll see that in the next game. Uh, she was fun. Um, Darn Corneo. There's another Walmart resident that keep popping up every little which way, and even though we keep beating him, that pervert keeps popping up in weird places. I'm pretty sure we'll finally take him down for good by the final installment. We glad to get rid of that guy. Crap. Uh, Costa del Sol, like I said, that's probably one of my favorite areas of the game. Fun experience. In terms of mini games, that's probably got the one place that the mini games were actually kind of fun, because they don't have any point to it outside of trying to get the high score in order to get a particular gear. But it's not it's not pertinent to the overall narrative like almost everything else tend to be. You can legit play it for fun. Um think I pretty much covered all the other regions. But the final thing I want to talk about is the music. The music in is its own entity, all on its own, which is very cool. Very, very cool. You know, of course, FF7 has always been renowned to this day. It's been, you know, is the best game in terms of music. You know, it's like, you know, hiring Hans Zimmer every freaking time, and he just comes in because he loves the franchise. This complete orchestra. It's like, I know they actually have concerts playing Final Fantasy music. At some point, I really want to go to a concert where they just play all these classical Final Fantasy music. It's like I'm going to the opera and but I'm listening to Final Fantasy music instead of like Beethoven or something. So yeah, in its own, each region has its own tone of music that kind of sets the mood, sets the mood every time you get in there. But of course they play like the classics, obviously. But I think Grassland, Costa del Sol, I think those probably like my favorite, you know, new musical kind of melodies in a particular region. But this video is going on long enough. But it's just so much going on with this game. I had to cover each little basis as much as I can. Like I said, overall, I give this game like a 90% of a positive rating. But I was, you know, it could have been better if like the mini games, you know, for the most part, did not take you out because of the overcomplicatedness. And then another knock I have against it with like not having a very cohesive narrative connection with the timeline for you can easily to understand. That is another thing that could overall fix, at least, you know, prop up the game a little bit more. But even despite those negatives I have against this game, I still think this game will probably be game of the year. Not only because of the overall quality, it's because outside of Black Myth Wukong, which is another game I'm hyped for, because it's the only other new game I'm excited to play this year, is kind of dry in terms of new games. I won't say not new games, but just games people like in general, like, you know, must have kind of stuff. Black Myth has been prepping for years now. Same thing with like, you know, the new FF7 trilogy. But there's no game coming out this year that rise to the same quality of standard. It was like last year, it's just riddled with so much cool games that it's kind of like we're spoiled all last year. This year is going to get kind of dry. Next year, you might have a little bit more of a bump in terms of anticipated games. But as of right now, there's only 2 games that probably have, you know, a possibility of winning Game of the Year. Is Black Myth Wukong and this. That is it. Of course, they got Tekken that came out earlier this year, but that's not going to be nominated for Game of the Year. It will win Best Fighting Game of the Year, but it won't be nominated for Game of the Year. Let's just face it. I'd be curious to see what other games that will be nominated for Game of the Year, but let's be honest, FF7 Rebirth will win. But anyway, that is all I have to say about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in terms of my overall experience with the game, all the negatives and the positives. But if you played Rebirth, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment, let me know what your overall experience has been with it. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you guys a little bit later as I will go through my movie review of the Disney original film Smart House. So look out for that in a little while. But thank y'all for joining me. I'll see you guys later. Peace.